Hey, my name is Amoga, co-founder and CEO of Carbon Origins. We're a robotics and VR company on a mission to make robots commonplace. So we're a group of scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs. We have landed robots on Mars, we've launched suborbital rockets, we've deployed satellite constellations, developed VR technologies for Disney. We're very passionate about deep tech, and we see robotics as the future of front-end labor. And our goal is to incubate that in a location, in a place where it can get the most TLC. We originally started the company in California, but we moved to Minnesota a few months ago. Really affordable to build robots in the United States here in Minnesota. There are a lot of contract manufacturers here with the right expertise. There are other companies building robots here. It is going to be the hotbed for robot manufacturing. The reason is, if you can build Cpis, our robots, to work in the Minnesota weather and geography, they can work anywhere.
Now, when you hire someone with a disability, you've immediately led by example. You've said you trust a new perspective, that you're confident in that person, in yourself, and your team. Now, I work with a theater company, and we have signs on the wall that say, "Work your quirk," and radical inclusion. They emphasize that what makes us different gives us strength, a new perspective, a creative edge. In Cajun cooking, there's an ingredient called the lagniappe, and it's that little something something that keeps you coming back. Hire somebody with a disability. It's the lagniappe thing to do.
So, you've decided to start your own business. You have the resources to sell or the services your new customers need. So what's next? Here's a simple checklist to help you get started. First, choose your business structure. Do you want a sole proprietorship, partnership, limited liability company, or corporation? Each form has tax and financial consequences. Next, check to make sure the name you want to use for your business is available. You can do this by checking with the Minnesota Secretary of State office. If you want to be a sole proprietor, all you have to do is register the business name with the Secretary of State office. Or if your business is going to be an LLC or a corporation, when you file the business structure registration with the Secretary of State's office, that registration also includes the business name. After that, you may need to obtain federal and state tax identification numbers from the Internal Revenue Service and the Minnesota Department of Revenue. Note that some businesses won't need to take this step. Need is determined by the number of business owners, if the business will have employees, and if the business makes taxable sales or provides taxable services. Next, obtain any necessary licenses and permits from state and local government. Then you will need to buy or rent space for the business and set up phone and internet service. You'll also want to start a banking and credit relationship with a bank or other financial institution. And don't forget to write a business plan with benchmarks to guide you through business growth. We can help you.
And remember, if you need help in any of these steps, please reach out to us here at the Small Business Assistance Office. We have staff available to answer your questions.
My name is John Hauk. I'm president of LightRun Incorporated. LightRun manufactures and sells a specialized unweighting tool for survivors of stroke, traumatic brain injury, and other injuries. I started out my career working for a company called Cardiac Pacemakers, then later on St. Jude Medical, along with a couple of startups in between. So I came out of the cardiac world, and Minnesota has been a great place for a medical device career. Our product has been sold and is currently being used in Hennepin County Medical Center, the VA Hospital in Minneapolis, North Memorial Hospital, and we're soon going to be delivering a system to Courage Kenny. So we are getting local traction in spite of the pandemic, and our goal is to go nationwide in 2022 and beyond.
Well, I met Andrew in 2010. He was a recent graduate from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. So he already had his education before he came to us. And he was looking for work as an architect.
And I applied for over 200 jobs all over the US. I applied for jobs in Hawaii, New York, Florida, and didn't get any sort of response. And after I'd applied for all of those different jobs, I realized that the job market right now is really low, and that I was facing discrimination, as were a lot of people with disabilities.
So he's deaf, and the world is hearing, and so of course the biggest barrier for him was communication. He worked with MCIL on job interviewing skills, and he did a very nice job talking about his experience and his work qualifications, but he did struggle a little bit with the accommodation issue, and so we worked a little bit more on that.
It was my good fortune to meet Andrew back in 2007, 2008. Andrew was someone who was deaf, and he had graduated from architectural school. Really my charge was, how can I help Andrew network, take smaller steps given what the economy was.
He really advocated in my job search. He wants people to get out there. He connected me with people in the field because that's what I needed. He reached out to MnDOT, the Minnesota Department of Transportation, in the Affirmative Action Office. He contacted Lynette Geschwind. She was the head of the Affirmative Action Office at MnDOT. And she was able to set up a contract job for me to inspect airport terminals. It was a fascinating job, but again, it was contract work. And they actually didn't seem to see me as a person with disabilities. Based on my resume, they said via email that they were just really impressed with my experience, and they wanted to give me a chance.
When we launched Andrew, we were not focused on his disability. We helped him develop the skills to market himself as an architect. No one with a disability gets a job because of their disability. It's all about skills, and Andrew's a perfect example of someone that took what we helped him learn and was able to independently get a job in the private sector.
Do you run a small business in Minnesota? Are you trying to expand your operations? Or need help adjusting to changes brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic? Then contact your local Small Business Development Center.
We'd like you to know that whether you're starting a brand new business, growing an existing one, or if your business needs help because of the COVID pandemic, the SBDC can provide that help, and it won't cost you a penny.
These are hard times, but if you need help with your business, Small Business Development Centers have real professionals standing by, ready to help you develop your business plan, do marketing and research, set up your accounting, gain access to capital, and much more. And they do it all for free. So contact us today at mnsbdc.com.
In Minnesota, we're training our workforce for the next chapter of the global economy.
I can't wait to get started on this project.
It's great hands-on practice.
I think our students will love it.
I'll bring this to the robotics lab.
Our education and business climate are among the best in the nation. And they work together to grow creative, high-skilled talent.
The possibilities are almost endless.
We're a state that works hard, boasting one of the highest participation rates in America's workforce.
Awesome, man. This looks great. We can really do anything here.
Great things are happening in Minnesota, and we can help you thrive.
Final touch, man. Checkmate.
Join us.
Great, thanks so much. Welcome, everyone. Really glad to have so many members of the press with us today. A lot of interest in the topic. I'm Alicia, the Director of Communications for Deed. As Eric said, please do keep your phones or cameras on mute to mitigate echoes. We'll have press questions at the end, and you can type questions in the chat or use the raise hand function. So we're live, and with that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Grove.
Great. Thanks, Alicia. Good to see you all. Happy to be here this morning alongside Oriana Casal, our interim labor market information director. Angelina DeWin is on maternity leave, so Oriana has graciously agreed to step in and lead the team once again. She's a very familiar face, I think, to many of you on this call. Excited to talk jobs today, of course, and as you can see from the release just put out about a half an hour ago, we have hit another record. It has been just a year of record-breaking unemployment rates for the state of Minnesota. This is the lowest unemployment rate we've had in the history of our state. 1.8% was the unemployment rate in June. That is half of the nation's unemployment rate, which is 3.6%. As you recall, in May, 2%. We were the second lowest unemployment rate in the nation in May. We'll find out in the next couple of days here where we rank nationally, but it's very possible we will have the lowest. I think Nebraska was the lowest last month, but 1.8% is an unprecedentedly low unemployment rate. And the good news of that is that the reason it went down is due to people moving from unemployment to employment. We've continued to see that labor force participation rate tick up. It is now at 68.5%, which is another 1/10 of a percentage increase. We're getting a little over half of building back that labor force participation rate from the drops that it took at the start of the pandemic. So that is good news. Over the last 6 months, Minnesota's job growth has been at a rate of 1.6%, outpacing the nation's at 1.5%. And over the year, our job growth is at 3.2%. We've built about 91,000 jobs back into our economy in the last year in Minnesota, which is good news. This month, however, we did see a flat number for job growth, just a little over 100 jobs that were gained in Minnesota over the last month. Again, that's a seasonally adjusted number. It's not the raw number, but it's seasonally adjusted. And the private sector lost about 400 jobs as well. So a flat month this month compared to some gains we've seen in recent months. The May number we should share as well was revised. So we revised that number up by 900 jobs for last month's job numbers. Compared to the U.S. did gain jobs in June, up about 0.2%. That month, about 372,000 jobs gained in the nation that month. So that's the national picture there. One of the things that we always want to point out here is what does this mean for various groups in Minnesota? We did see the Black unemployment rate go up again in June. It actually went from 6.9% up to 7.4%. Again, that's a 12-month rolling average. Important to keep in mind. That's better data, we think, to take a look at where those numbers are headed. Hispanic unemployment rate went down in June to 3.1%. And again, that's compared to a white unemployment rate on a 12-month rolling average of 2.4% in June. So it's a story that I think is worthy of exploring here and that we're talking to employers and job seekers about a lot. You're seeing the unemployment rate in aggregate go down for the state, but for Black Minnesotans in particular, it is going up on that 12-month rolling average. It indicates that I think employers can, and we hope will do more to employ more workers in that demographic, and we're doing a lot at Deed to focus on that, as you all know, and we can talk more about that a little bit later. A few more pieces of information for June, just in terms of the big picture, in terms of recovering that 417,000 jobs that we lost in February of 2020. We are now 81% of the way back. Our projections still show that we will capture all those jobs back, we hope, by the end of this year or early next, based on the data modeling. But we're about 81% way back of recapturing all those jobs. I mentioned that we were a 3.2% growth rate of the last year. I think one thing we know everyone is looking at, of course, is the story around wages and inflation. We have seen, of course, wages go up in Minnesota consistently throughout the year, but much like the rest of the country, that has not outpaced inflation. The Cpi Inflation Index, which is a national number for urban consumers, is at 9.0% over the year, and wage growth in Minnesota is at 5.2%. Notably there, I think last month we reported that wage growth in Minnesota in aggregate was at around, I think, 3.5% or so. So it actually lagged the nation's wage growth. But we were interested to see that this month wage growth was at what popped up for us to 5.2%. So we're now kind of on par with the nation as it relates to wage growth. And I think that's not surprising. We're hearing from employers every day that as this market gets tighter and tighter, again, just a bafflingly low unemployment rate of 1.8%, new techniques are needed. And so seeing those wages grow again by a significant amount this month, average earnings over $1.70 roughly in terms of wage growth in our economy, we're now on par with the nation in wage growth. So I think employers are, again, just looking for new ways to attract workers in a really tight market. And we're talking down to the individual person. I mean, we were in Duluth last week, a town of, or city rather, of 85,000 people. Our data shows us in Duluth, for example, there's only about 670 people in that entire city looking for work. If you do the numbers, again, 85,000 people, only 670 people looking for jobs. That is an unbelievably tight labor market. So something we wanted to point out there. Just briefly, a few other details. I'll turn it to Oriana in a moment to go through some of the industry-specific components here. But we did want to kind of lift up a couple of different things in terms of broader trends. One of the things that we're seeing is that involuntary part-time workers continue to decline. So we're at a record low of only 30,400 part-time workers, involuntary part-time workers rather, in June on a 12-month rolling average compared to 33,000 in May. This indicates that that workers aren't settling for part-time jobs. They prefer full-time jobs, and they can find full-time jobs. So, I think that tight labor market, again, it's challenging for employers. It's challenging in this climate, but boy, is it a good time to be a job seeker. There is a lot of opportunity in Minnesota, and job seekers can be picky in where they go and what they choose. And I think particularly given that wages have gone up and that that full-time jobs are available, employers are finding ways to make part-time jobs into full-time jobs. This is an economy that is really a workers' economy right now in terms of opportunity. And again, I would just highlight that wage growth as another sign that employers are adapting to this every day. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to Oriana for some of the more interesting details, and then we'd love to take your questions. Oriana, over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thanks, Alicia. So as the Commissioner said, Minnesota took a bit of a pause in June, adding only 100 jobs on a seasonally adjusted basis. But over the six-month period from January to June, we're still just slightly outpacing the U.S. in terms of job growth, just by 1/10 of a percentage point. But right in there. The unemployment rate continued to drop, now down to 1.8%. This is well below the lowest record, the lowest record set previous to this period. So that was in 1999, and that was 2.5%. So 1.8% is pretty unbelievable. While the tight labor market is undoubtedly slowing hiring in Minnesota, people did enter and re-enter the labor market, with the size of the labor force growing by 5,400 workers in June. Next slide. So this slide displays labor force participation rates by race. Black and Hispanic Minnesotans have higher labor force participation rates than white workers. So Black workers are at 68.9%. Hispanic workers in Minnesota are at 79.7%, which is really very high. And white Minnesotans are at 68.4% in June. So these are on a 12-month rolling average. And then in terms of unemployment rates, the Commissioner went over this a bit, but in June, the data showed that Black and Hispanic workers have higher unemployment rates than white workers in Minnesota. So Black workers are at 7.4%, Hispanic workers are at 7.4% is an increase over the month. For Black workers, Hispanic workers are at 3.1%, that's a decrease, and then white workers are at 2.4%, which is level from last month. So this does indicate that, employers who are really struggling to hire right now need to continue to use strategies to find those available workers from communities of color in Minnesota. And then next slide. This slide looks at, actually, I think we want the next slide. I think we were looking at the wrong slide there. Okay. Now we're on the slide that's showing male female labor force participation and unemployment rate. So this is that analysis, going back to that analysis that looks at the change in the labor force participation rate from prior to the pandemic, February 2020, and then so that's the blue bar, and then combined with the current unemployment rate. These are all 12-month moving averages. So women's unemployment rate has been dropping over the last 6 months, and it's now lower than men's at 2.8%. Men are at 3.2%. But as has long been predicted and has kind of been fluctuating, women's labor force participation rate has not gotten back to where it was prior to the pandemic in Minnesota. So women were at 64.4% in June 2021, so a year ago, and now they're at 64.1% this month. So a slight slide in labor force participation rates for women, whereas men's labor force participation increased over that period. So from 72.4% a year ago to 72.9% this month. Prior to the pandemic in February 2020, women were at 66.2% labor force participation rate, so 2 1/10 point below where they are now, whereas men were at 73.9%, or just 1 percentage point below where they are now. So you can see that in the slides too, the 2.1% for women and the 1% for men. This is the over the year job growth slide. So Minnesota added 91,400 jobs, up 3.2%. Job growth was strongest in leisure and hospitality, up 11.9%. That's 28,500 jobs over the year. Other services up 6.2%. That's 6,600 jobs over the year. Manufacturing was up 5.5%. That's 17,300 jobs over the year. And that industry really stands out as one that is doing a lot of hiring. It did take a slight pause this month, but it's been doing a lot of hiring and very strong, even compared to the nation. Government showed a loss over the year of 345. It's down just 1/10 of 1 point. And construction was almost entirely flat over the month, adding just 60 jobs. Over the year, adding just 60 jobs over the year. So construction seems to be having some problems, quite possibly with hiring, because we're also seeing their wages tick up. And you can advance it one slide. This is the job loss and recovery since the pandemic recession. So that period from February 2020 to April 2020, when we lost 417,600 jobs, and then how we've added jobs since then. So since then, we've added 336,900 jobs, or 81% of the jobs that we lost during the pandemic back. Looking at that by industry, construction, professional, scientific, and technical services, and manufacturing have more than gained the jobs lost. Mining is exactly back where it was in February 2020. State and federal governments have continued to lose jobs. Of the industries that were most impacted by the pandemic, other services has regained 89% of the jobs it lost. Accommodations and food services has regained 80%. Arts, entertainment, and recreation has regained 85%. So those industries hardest hit are all in that 80 to 90% range of having regained all the jobs that they've lost. A couple of sectors that stand out as struggling to regain jobs: healthcare and social assistance, which has regained only 69% of the jobs it lost during the recession, and management of companies, which is at only 63%. Okay, now you can advance the slide. Thanks. So this this slide looks at wages and inflation. It just over the overall picture, wages rose 5.2% for all non-farm jobs in Minnesota and 5.1% in the US over the year in June. So that's a June number over the year. But of all that, but all of that growth was eaten up by inflation, as we've been talking about over the past couple of months. Inflation grew at 9% over the year in June. So what this graph does is it stacks. The green bars are over the year wage increases from 2020 to 2021, and the blue bars that stack on top are over the year wage increases from 2021 to 2022 in June. You can see that even with strong gains in both years, inflation is still growing faster than wages overall. So inflation is that last bar on the right. A few industries, however, are seeing stronger wage growth than inflation growth. So food services and drinking places, which is up 6.9% over the year, and 23.4% over 2 years. So that industry is growing quite a bit faster than inflation. However, as you can see, the wage growth does seem to be slowing a bit this year. Still strong though. Non-durable goods manufacturing was up 7.4% over the year this year. And 15.4% over 2 years. So that's another industry that's growing faster than where wages are growing faster than inflation. Nursing and residential care facilities is an interesting situation because all of their wage growth, 12.2% over the year in June, basically they were flat the year before. So all of their wage growth happened this year, and they're still doing quite well, but not quite keeping pace with inflation because of that lack of wage growth last year. So that industry has been having a very difficult time hiring, but we are seeing the hiring pick up a little bit there because of these likely because of these wage increases, making those jobs more competitive with other jobs in the economy. So the wage growth picture does look to be shifting a bit away from those industries that were hardest hit by the pandemic, like food service and drinking places and retail trade, towards some of the slightly higher wage industries, including non-durable goods and construction. Construction is in there too, because as you can see, construction had a wage growth of 7.6%. This year, and a fairly substantial wage growth last year also. So that industry is also clearly looking to find workers. And that's all I have. I think we're going to open it up for questions now. Yeah, this slide, well, I'll mention this slide too. This slide is just a trend analysis of wages, wage growth in Minnesota compared to wage growth in the US. So you can see that wages in Minnesota have, been and continue to be higher than in the US on average. And they're basically wage growth is keeping pace. Minnesota wage growth is keeping pace with US wage growth.
I think with that, we'll turn to questions, and if you can use the hand raising feature if it's available to you within Teams, we'll go from there. Kavita.
Or do you think this is all just about a tight labor market and like a sign that finally that tight labor market is really depressing job growth quite a bit?
I think it's more the latter, Kavita. I am not hearing from a lot of employers that suddenly they're pulling back on hiring or instituting hiring freezes. I continually hear from the businesses that we talk to that they're trying to hire people but can't find individuals. I mean, 1.8% is really an eye-poppingly low unemployment rate. some of the components of this is, of course, seasonal adjustment, right? Because in raw numbers, we added more jobs than 100, but you have to seasonally adjust using previous year's data, and that influences the number, and that's just how it's always been done. That's how the BLS and every state navigates these numbers. But I think it is more the tight market that is really driving this. I'm not hearing a lot of employers cooling off on trying to hire folks, but it's just harder. And I think that last graph Orion showed, you're right, we are pacing roughly on par with the nation on wage growth. But those last few months, you kind of saw that little bit of a hockey stick there, as I think even in these last few months, you've just seen employers really kick into gear more wage growth in Minnesota than before, and of course already operating from a higher base average wage compared to most states. Orion, would you add anything to that?
Well, I'll just add, it is possible that Minnesota took a bit of a pause from hiring this month, but I mean, looking at the over the year numbers, we're actually up over the month, year in June compared to May. So our over the year growth rate in May was 2.6%. Our over the year growth rate in June is 3.2%. So, I mean, we're really seeing very strong, a longer term trend of really very strong job growth.
Great point. Theo, let's go to you.
Yeah, I was just curious, comparing the what you've just put out about flat job growth in June versus the nationwide job growth numbers, which were still relatively strong in June. Just wondering if there's something there that you think is lacking in Minnesota. I mean, as we compare those two numbers, flat here versus gains nationally.
It's a fair question, Theo, and I think it's too early to tell. I mean, this is, of course, 1 month of data, and we always try to be thoughtful about, looking at the longer term, which is why we are sharing those numbers around 6-month growth and over the year growth, because it has been a prolonged period of growth, and Minnesota has, especially in the last 6 months, actually outpaced the nation. So I don't think we're reading too much into it. Again, these numbers are seasonally adjusted. They're not the overall raw numbers of growth. We aren't hearing things here that are markedly different, other than we have the 5th tightest labor market in the entire country. I mean, it is just really tight, and great time to be a job seeker, harder time to be a business. Certainly individual businesses occasionally get discouraged on hiring and find new ways. One of the things that we're really encouraging, and we see a lot of businesses doing, is to invest more in automation. There are some grant programs and training programs our department offers to help kind of mid-sized manufacturers do that. We are looking to use some more federal dollars to expand those sorts of programs. I think the concern that automation was bad for the economy that some businesses or leaders had over time has largely gone away. We need more automation in our economy to increase productivity. So, I think employers are finding new ways to get things done too that might not involve hiring. But again, I don't think comparing Minnesota to the nation, we're seeing anything markedly different yet. But we're going to continue to monitor this, right? I mean, flat job growth in June is one data point, and we'll see where we're at in July.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Theo. Brian, let's go to you.
Do you have any information on multi-job? Are folks taking on more than one job to blunt some of these cost pressures they're facing? Do you have any information that shows whether that's trending in any particular direction?
Orion, why don't we go to you on that one?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We don't have super current data on that. And I would have to look at what the most recent year we have on it is. But if you want to give me a call, we can certainly dig into that for you.
Orion and then our economists here at DEED have shared with me over time that Minnesota has generally been a state that has a higher percentage of individuals who take more than one job in our state. So that's kind of been a unique aspect of our economy over time. And I think it's a good question. Let's look into the data. Again, that data on less people taking involuntary part-time jobs is related here. I think that we're at an all-time low for that. And I think it's because employers, need to offer something better because seekers have choices.
And just unrelated, what goes down tends to go back up. Do you have any sense? I mean, I know this is kind of unprecedented, but do you have any sense as to whether you expect that to happen incrementally? Do you expect things to spike? I mean, what has been the pattern when things get this low?
In terms of the unemployment rate?
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bit ahead for everybody looking at these rates nationally. I mean, they are incredibly low, and they're related to that labor force participation rate. Part of the way we can get it stabilized at a labor force participation rate is obviously more people getting into the market. But Orion, you've been at Deed for some time. What sort of trends might you surface up here for Brian and others?
Well, I would just remind people that these are very long that have been expected and anticipated for, for decades. They're related to the aging workforce. As you can see, that white labor force participation rate is ticking down. That's people retiring. Those people are not going to be coming back into the labor market. For the most part. I mean, of course, if the stock market keeps tanking, maybe we'll have a chance of getting some of them back. But those people are probably going to be coming. If they do come back, they're going to be coming back part-time. So no, these are based on long-term trends. The unemployment rate will likely remain low for the foreseeable future. 1.8% is a bit extreme. I don't think anyone expects the unemployment rate to remain that low for very long. But certainly we're not going to see higher, 4 and 5 and 6% unemployment rates. Okay, this is me making a prediction here, which I probably shouldn't do, but unlikely to see those anytime soon.
Yeah, no, it's these numbers are historic, and it is a time of great opportunity. I talked to you all before about some of the work we're doing at Deed here, and I think one of the things we're seeing is just this is a role government can help play in terms of connecting employers to labor pools they might not have access to. Many companies don't have a large HR office with multilingual staff and connections into community. You look at some of those unemployment rates by race, and it's clear that more employers need to be looking in new places. And our Summer of Jobs campaign is trying to do that through all of the labor groups that we're highlighting and the jobs that are in demand that we're shadowing as well. Peter, I see you raise your hand.
Yeah, thank you. This is for The Economist. Is there any precedent for a job-full recession? The opposite, say, of a jobless recovery? Because I've seen some suggestions that this is different and might look different, that the U.S. and the state might indeed fall into a technical recession without an impact on jobs.
Yes. Yes, Brian.
I mean,
Orion,
I would. I mean, I think a couple of things.
Yeah, I don't think we could do this.
In the late 1990s, was it 19? In the mid 1990s, the U.S. went into recession. Minnesota did not. We continued to grow, and that led to the lowest unemployment rate that we have on record prior to this period. So, for one thing, there's a precedent for states to diverge from the national trend. Secondly, even a slowing in hiring at this time is not going to likely create a dramatic spike in the unemployment rate. So, I think those two things would point to if we do go into recession, which I realize there are more and more signs pointing in that direction, but I do think it's still premature to really talk about that. But if we do go into a recession, those I think we are pointing in a direction where we would not see a huge spike in the unemployment rate.
Well, thanks, Peter. I think we're at time, unless there's any final questions before we wrap.
Wait, can I get one more in? It's Kavita.
Sure.
I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the high Black unemployment rate. I mean, in a very tight labor market, you would expect it to go down, right? And you're not almost seeing the opposite happen. What do you think is happening there?
Well, we're asking ourselves and others in the market that same is a very important question. I think Well, we conjecture part of it is that Black Minnesotans are overrepresented in lower wage jobs and jobs with higher churn. So having longer term stable employment is less of a trend in the Black community just by the numbers. So I think that is part of it. I'd be remiss if I didn't say there is systemic racism in our economy and that there are challenges that Black Minnesotans face in finding opportunities in our economy. And then there's also just sometimes a lack of connection between Black communities and employers that have longer term, more stable job opportunities. And that is something that state government really needs to focus on. I mean, that's our job and something that we want to help businesses and help workers on. And that's part of the Summer of Jobs campaign. It's part of all of our workforce efforts. But it really shouldn't be the case. There's no reason that rate should be going up. It should be going down like every other ethnic groups and racial groups rate. And so this is something we are committed to. It is a central part of DEED's strategy moving forward. And it's not just a moral imperative, but it's an economic imperative. This is how we're going to grow as an economy. You all have heard me and others say this time and again. You know, our population in Minnesota is growing over the next 10 years, 70% by people of color. So this is our future workforce. And if our economy can't figure out how to hire and retain those workers more effectively, it's at our own economic peril. So it is just centrally important to what we're doing. I think there's probably a lot of other factors here that we're going to learn over time, and hopefully these numbers are going to reverse. But I'm glad you asked the question and pointed it out, because it's something that that gives us some concern and that is helping us form strategy and our approach as an agency. So I think with that, we're at time. Appreciate everyone being here today, and please reach out to our office, either to Alicia or Jan, with additional questions on the data or beyond, and have a great rest of your Thursday. Thanks, everybody.